Thank you, Mr. Speaker. I'm going to be joined by my colleagues today, and we were going to talk about the financial situation here in the United States and the meaning of the various ideas and proposals that have been put forward. I want to compliment my colleagues on the Republican side for their tenacity in putting out their sound bites, but I think it's very, very important for the American people to understand in detail exactly what is being proposed here. We did have what was called the cut, cap, and balance proposal. You might also call it the cut, slash, and burn proposal, because once you get past the sound bites and get into the details of what has actually been proposed, you got to stand back and go, whoa, wait a minute. Is that really what a balanced budget amendment is all about? We're going to go into that in a few moments to really understand exactly what this balanced budget amendment is and the effect that it will have on Americans, particularly on women in America. But before we go there, we need to step back a bit and understand how is it that we got into this situation with this deficit, $14 trillion. How did we get here? It's really important to understand that before you go off and try to solve the problem. You need to know, what is the situation? What is the circumstance? Well, this little chart here lays out where the deficit came from. Now, understand that at the end of the Clinton administration in 2001, January 2001, the United States government was running a surplus, a $300 billion plus surplus. Had run that for the previous 2 years. So we had a surplus, and we were on the path during the decade 2001-2010 to literally pay off the entire American debt. It would be paid off. Now, whether that's a good idea or not, you can debate that, but that's what we were on. So the trajectory was, had we maintained the same policies, the same growth in our economy, we would have paid off the total debt. However, something happened. Now, what happened? What happened was change in policies and two wars. The Afghanistan war following 2000, between the 9/11 event in 2001 and then the Iraq war in 2003. Neither war paid for it. For the first time in American history, neither war was paid for. All borrowed money. First time ever in America's history. Now, another thing happened along the way, and that is in 2001, the first George W. Bush tax cut, followed in 2003 by the second George W. Bush tax cut. And here's what they meant. Take a careful look at this. This is where the deficit started. We start here with the Bush-era tax cuts, and over the years, so that in 2019, 20 years, we have this extraordinary growth in the deficit caused by those tax cuts. Of course, it assumes that tax cuts will continue on into 2019. The red area here are the wars. Again, not paid for. So the Iraq war and the Afghanistan war. The other thing is this downturn in the economy. The downturn in the economy occurred in 2008. How did it happen? Why did we have that crash of the American economy? We had it because the federal government stepped back from regulating the financial institutions, allowing them to run wild, assuming that they would be smart enough to regulate themselves. That didn't happen. They were smart enough to be extraordinarily greedy. Wall Street went on a greed binge, and the result was the collapse of the financial industry. Needless to say, there are other players in this game, and many Americans, hundreds of thousands of Americans, joined in the game and took out mortgages, bought houses that there was no way they could possibly afford them. The financial industry, the mortgage industry, and Wall Street bankers, and we wound up with the great collapse of 2008. To deal with that, the bailout of Wall Street occurred. Most of that has now been paid back. It worked. Did it work for the benefit of Americans? Well, it stabilized the financial institutions, and it certainly worked for the benefit of Wall Street. That program occurred in the final months of the George W. Bush administration. Unfortunately, The American economy has not recovered despite the spending of some $700 billion in the stimulus program. It actually worked. It didn't work enough to get the economy moving forward. So we wound up with this huge deficit. Going forward, the deficit remains in place because the wars continue. $178 billion a year spent on the war in Afghanistan and Iraq. Also continuing are the George W. Bush tax cuts. This is where the deficit's coming from. And thirdly, the economy has not recovered. That's where the deficit is. Now, what do you do about that?